Welcome to the Not Your Diversity channel with Not Your Diverse Person, me, for all your unpopular opinions, real stories, and alternative test and tried strategies and tools to get you beyond toxic diversity policies and experiences to real representation. Today, all three. Feels like a great moment to do a philosophical essay on why I think every minority should own things like Gucci, but only very specific, obnoxious, uglyish, limited edition Gucci's, like for example these that I bought from another minority salesman at Gucci, giving me some kind of exclusive deal on which I will tell the details later, but they're not so interesting necessarily for this story. I think more interesting is why every minority should have especially these types of luxury items for very specific situations like airports, hotels, and academia events, but not for the reasons you might think at all. I also want to tell you a little bit of where it comes from, because I realized the obsession with certain luxury items and labels runs very deep with minorities, specifically those coming from immigrant backgrounds, specifically those coming from immigrant backgrounds with countries having been colonized by the countries where the labels come from, especially the culture surrounding luxury labels, and a little bit of what currently is going on the luxury market with them fighting for certain stakes of the global population, targeting specific demographics who might have been seen as minorities before. And I won't go into the whole LVMH strategy of finding popular upcoming minority designers, placing them at the head of a luxury label, and then letting them burn out, which is very symbolic for a lot of diversity policies. We'll maybe go into that another time. This is more about the consumer side of the luxury industry and how not to fall, or how I don't need to explain that to you, but more what the difference is between falling in that pitfall trap of being placed even lower on the economic hierarchy with capitalist bullshit such as logos and labels, which is something that ties into many minority cultures, versus using it as a strategic weapon or selection mechanism, which is why I have it and what the salesman sold me, being a good salesman. Is there anything else I need to tell you before we start? Historical breakdown, my case for strategic luxury, and yeah, about this platform, because it's very new, so thanks a lot for being here and bearing with me through these first videos. My mission here is to just create a safe space for change makers and go beyond what might look right or sound right and connect to what actually makes real, good, sustainable change. And for that, we need to have some uncomfortable conversations maybe, but I think in this space we can make them pretty fun and comfortable. So yeah, you might find random ramblings about Gucci. They'll be called story times, ramblings, and most of it will be tips and tricks and tools. The main trick in this video is know why you would buy certain luxury items and know what they're used for, because I would never just wear these on the street except to break them in. Do what you want, of course, but I'm breaking the case for not necessarily enjoying luxury but using it as a weapon. Yeah, and if you want to subscribe, like, comment, or just simply let me know what you think could be improved or what this channel could use, feel free to contact me. See the email in the description. So where I come from and the cultural background. So there's a reason why I would even end up at a store as Gucci, right? Because it's not necessarily in my shopping budget as it is for very little people, even those who might shop there. And there's a certain luxury, symbols, products that have a history of being status symbols for minorities. I think Vice published an essay once on the obsession internationally, globally, of minority cultures with Ferrero Rocher little golden chocolates. And even though they are super overpriced, they don't cost as much as we as children would think when we saw them stacked out, usually mainly for people who were visiting, as some symbol of being settled, being comfortable. Ferrero Rocher is stacked up at a special occasion is the ultimate symbol of Western decadence for immigrant families. There's also a reason why my grandmother and my great-grandmother would always travel with Louis Vuitton wallets and a suitcase, a duffel bag, even way before that logo obsession was a fashion thing. That was just something for the French elite. They would use it as a status symbol to make sure that their travels would go well and that they would get a certain treatment in hotels. And I was very young when I saw that mythological symbol of the Louis Vuitton wallet of my great-grandmother that would one day be passed on to me as some promise of an immigrant and colonialized line being successful in the Western society with the Western symbols. There's also a reason why chains are so important in hip-hop culture, because the gold that you are wearing on your chest is very hard for anyone to take from you, especially at least not without physical combat. And that is something that a type of wealth that you acquire to provide stability that you might not have known, and that you can pass on and show the community around you that that stability is there to pass on. So acquiring wealth and showing off wealth and certain symbols of wealth have always been very important in different minority cultures for lots of different reasons, and I'm sure sociologists and anthropologists would be able to explain this to you in much more depth, but that is just something I know from my own personal experience, right? The fight for minorities now going on is very interesting, considering the trap of the fight for minorities in the luxury industry going on right now is very interesting, especially considering the trap of the luxury industry. having been set out for minorities for a long time. So not only minorities, but anyone that falls below a certain economic spending power. So the way that many luxury brands started their cosmetic lines was to be able to provide that high-end luxury experience to the customer who would not be able to pay for it in a little lipstick form, for example. And many brands have also expanded this into entire product lines, sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly, where the cheaper line of products with lower quality will have bigger logos and more offensive display of wealth, when real wealth is often much more silent, right? And the trap of being on the lower end of the economic scale, but reaching for those symbols on the higher end of the, or just a bizarre non-existing point somewhere outside the economic scale that people live on, is that by striving to buy such symbols, people will even and show off abundance, people often put themselves in debt, or at least don't empower themselves economically at all in reality. So that's very interesting, considering that's the way it has been for a long time, and the reason why certain labels and certain logos are very popular amongst people who are not necessarily able to afford it, or want to make a point that they are able to afford it. Barely. It's very interesting that suddenly now the bigger brands, high-end fashion brands, are wanting to target entire sections, targets of the populations that have been seen as minorities, because they are now entire markets, both in Western countries as well as new markets such as Asia, opening up big time for basically dominating the luxury industry right now. So also being what most new collections and campaigns are targeted towards. That means minorities are now influencing the luxury industry in a whole new way. And I think that's very interesting, considering for a few years I've kind of made a sport out of checking with certain people in airports if I can talk to them or get a sense of who they are. Minorities in airports being dressed in, this is why I showed these particular examples. These are, if you might invest in Italian leather, wouldn't make sense to do it with canvas, embroidered canvas that tears very easily. Wouldn't make sense to do it in these colors. Wouldn't make sense to do it in this size. I won't wear them, not only for the reason that I don't want to slap or laugh in the face of all the homeless people around me living on the street, basically, here in one of the most expensive districts of the country, postal districts. But also because they are only for a strategic use, as I learned from that first woman at an airport, maybe when I was 16, a long time ago. But now I've seen many others like her who are dressed head to toe in labels that seem completely untouched, as if there's many more in the closet, in limited edition colors such as these. Not something that someone would invest in or wear often. Often even travel accessories like that. So that first woman I talked to at an airport once about why it's so important to have labels as a minority in an airport. Said the first thing you need to invest in is a Louis Vuitton suitcase, because you only use that suitcase for travel, and that sends a certain message. So why did my great-grandmother own that Louis Vuitton travel set as well? Way before the logo hype. And she was Algerian, by the way. And why are airports the most important symbol for this thing? I would also add luxury hotels, because most people of color know that in most luxury hotels, if you've ever been there, you will get stuck in the worst room or get bad treatment from certain people unless they place you in a certain class, for which you need flashy symbols such as these to compensate your being a minority. And I would also add the third category of events where a lot of academia or academic people are present, because for different reasons, well-related reasons. Let's first start with the airports and the hotels. The reptilian brain is the core of our brain, right? We have 3 layers of the brain, of which the outer parts are the most evolved and the most human, so to speak, the ones we gained once we became humans, broadly said. But that deepest part of our brain has been there since we've evolved from reptiles. And that one is very primal. That one is just there to hunt, kill, procreate, survive, basically. The reptilian brain sees everything through hierarchy and through fight or flight and through dominate or being dominated. And many people who work in either the luxury, not many people, but there's a certain type of person who gets attracted to the luxury industry or airports, places where they have power and where hierarchy and elite means a lot for that limited amount of time, and people are completely dependent on you, where you have final say. Those are not the people you want to encounter when you're a minority, and those are especially always the people you will encounter when you're traveling, or when you run into academic circles. Even though in airports it might be about domination and rules, you might be dependent on them for that reason. In hotels it might be about elite and service. You might be dependent on them for that reason. And in academic circles, it might be more that they are virtue signaling, and you might want to be able to vent out who's actually straight or not. Any minority knows how to code switch, and I don't need to explain to the target group of this particular video how to code switch. But luxury items are just another tool to code switch, and they are signals that you can flash in the faces of those particularly reptilian wired people in situations where you're extremely dependent on them and do not want to have a type of experience that you can imagine that you could run into in those places. And they work incredibly well, like 99% of the time. There might also be the person in power who's even extra angry at you, extra racist, extra violent because of you having certain status symbols. But that's the group that would already be openly abusing power in your face. That other majority that would normally be only microaggressing you, but putting you in real difficult situations, in those locations especially, those are the ones that you're able to completely turn around with just a few dumb reptilian flashy symbols. So definitely, yeah, I wouldn't say invest in that, but if you can get something secondhand, like that's what I have most of the time, except for this one. But as I said, I had a minority guy in the Gucci store basically having the entire floor for me and letting me try on everything and asking my opinion on everything, while the other really rich customers were like allowed to come into my space to look every now and then on a Saturday afternoon, super busy. But as he and I were both talking about our family and where we come from, and both in that location at Gucci to collect certain status symbols for certain reasons, he knew exactly what I was trying to do with these investments and got me something that wasn't for sale but was some kind of exclusive thing, and got me to be the only one who could buy it. And Gucci had to like open an entire account for themselves and make me into a special customer, and it was this whole thing which is something only people who don't grow up with money truly enjoy, and that money cannot buy. It's a type of privilege that we are actually searching for when we walk into those places to buy, because we didn't grow up with it. And the importance of status symbols and luxury symbols in minority communities is always in the lineage, right? It's towards your parents, it's towards your grandparents, but it's also towards your children and your great grandchildren, to signal stability and abundance and a sense of victory over the colonizer and their symbols. Yeah, so in academia, I would wear it to trigger the fake inclusive people, the fake woke people, the ones who will subconsciously or explicitly exclude you for wearing these types of things. Yeah, I'll explain that in a different video, but you probably understand what I mean if you made it to this part in the video. Define yourself when you're underrepresented. This is the most important thing I can say, and that's what fashion is made for, and you definitely don't need labels for that. So if you do use them as a costume, and use them to code switch, and use them against those who try to use them against you. Yeah, fashion and luxury is economic war. So use the labels as a parody.